So with this basically all done now, I'm not too confident with this build. This is, you know, not the best of fits. There's a lot of filler going on there. We've done all sorts of sanding, scribing, and because there's so much filler in there, I'm just not too confident with it. So normally we'd be going into the spray stage now, and we'd be putting on primers and then putting on the main coat, doing any sort of fancy painting, but I just feel like I need to get paint on this and see how it looks. If you remember, we did all this black on the underside of our nacelles. We did that so we can see what any sort of join lines or any filling that's been done, what it's actually going to look like when it's got paint on, so we know, you know, that's the end result, that's what it's going to look like. So for this one, I'm actually going to go off and just spray the whole model for visualization purposes, to just see what all the fillers like, see what work that needs to be done. So I'm not going to go off and use a proper primer. I'm actually I did get out of colour. I'm just going to go off and just use some, you know, any sort of colour, a nice light grey. It doesn't actually matter whatever you want to use. This is 276 light grey by Vallejo Model Air. As I say, use anything you want to use. I just want to get some paint on it so we can see what it's like. So nice and easy with this, right? We'll give it a good shake. Right, we want to get out some thinners. This is good old homebrew thinners. You can check out how to make this on the Genesis Models website. And we're going to pour about, maybe when it comes to Vallejo, maybe 40% thinners to paint. Right, so let's get this paint now. Make sure you always give them a good shake. We're going to do about 60% paint to thinners kind of ratio going on here. Right, and then just getting out a paintbrush. Nice old paintbrush in some clean water, and we're going to just give this a mix so we get all the paint and the thinners mixed together. Now, as you noticed, I put the thinners in first. I put the thinners in first because there is the thinners will go in first, and there's like a little reservoir just down here, nothing major, but that is what we can't mix in the colour cup, and so that's going to be the first thing that comes out. Always better to have thinners come out first than to have the paint, because the paint, if you put paint in first, it's going to be thick and you could end up clogging up your airbrush. So just spraying on a kitchen paper towel just to see how this is. Right, and actually I almost forgot, is when before we do any kind of spraying, I know this is just a quick visualization spray over, but still it's going to kind of act as a bit of a primer anyway, so we want to make sure we're all prepared and ready. Now, whenever you do loads and loads of sanding, we've got all these recesses and everything on our model. What can potentially happen is sanding dust gets into the recessed panel lines, recessed rivets, then you spray over it, and that sanding dust acts like a filler and fills in your recessed panel lines, recessed rivets. So always good idea, come along with a brush and just brush on your model all over in circles, right? And this should brush out any sort of sanding dust that may or may not have got into any recessed panel lines or recessed rivets. Right, the next thing I like to do is you get like a nice clean kitchen paper towel. Just in this little pot here, I have IPA. Really cool product to get hold of. It's what we use to mix up homebrew thinners. Right, just nice and pure IPA. And what we do is we rub this on. IPA is basically rubbing alcohol. Right, they use it in electronics and cleaning products and everything. So it cleans this up nice. Right, gets up any sort of, you know, things like grease. Grease is going to be really bad for spraying, right? It also dries really quickly. It evaporates really quickly, so it doesn't like soak into your model or anything. I mean, already I can see that has just dried off. So we haven't got to, if we use, say, water would, you know, take ages to dry, and if we came along and sprayed on top of water, not a good thing. IPA, we know it's going to dry mega quickly. So we're all prepared now for spraying. So we're just doing a quick simple one here, so nothing too fancy. I think my air pressure is really high. Air pressure, you want to be about 20 psi, maybe just below 20 psi. Right, and what we're going to do, we're going to start off with a simple light misty coat. Right, so it's just a quick, we spray on, right, and you probably won't even notice that it's gone down, because we want that misty coat, because the misty coat is going to stick better to this bare plastic, and what it does is we cut to air by just pressing down the trigger, dries really quickly, and it just allows all our other coats to stick better to the model. So now we've done a misty coat, we'll jump into a normal light coat. Now a light coat, we'll actually see this go down. If we see our paintwork looking wet, just move along, don't spray over the same area that already looks wet. Right, and there we go, we've got a nice light coat sprayed on just there. Again, we can cut to air and just blow this dry. You know, it is acrylics, they do dry pretty quick. Right, and basically you just want to see that it looks dry, because we know we're doing light coats here, we should be all good. So I can come in with a second coat, and the whole idea is just to keep doing that, coat after coat, until you've just got some good coverage. Right, and by doing that you should end up with some nice a nice finish, right? Because when we do spraying, the few things that you got to be careful of as a beginner anyway is, you know, your air pressure's up too high, so your paint's drying before it even hits the model, and then your model gets all rough, right? You want it to go down nice light coats, not big thick coats, and what you should end up with is a really good coverage with a really nice smooth surface, no rough bits, okay? But if you do have any sort of problems with your airbrushing, Genesis Models does have a basic airbrushing tutorial series. Go check that out, and we discuss all sorts of things like, you know, the paint getting rough because your air pressures, this and that. Go check that out. It's a good watch to watch before doing any sort of spray work here at Genesis Models. So go check that out, and I will now spray the rest of this model. So we've basically got our primer all the way over this model now, which, as I say, once you've got paint on a model, you can see all your mistakes, any sort of areas you need to sort out, and you know, you can go off and do it at this stage. If you've had to do any sanding, you know, just respray your primer down and it should all look good. But hopefully you haven't got as much work to do. I do realize this is a bit of a poor fit of a model, but we're gonna move along with this. So what we want to do is, I know the decals are going to make up a massive part for this model, but I think still we want to sort of give the paintwork a little bit of life. Now, because it's really scaled down, going off from what we normally do with pre-shading, which is like following all the panel lines and spraying all the panel lines black, coming in with your main colour, spraying that on top, and basically having this pre-shading come through just lightly enough to give it that weathering. It's a bit too scaled down. One in, you know, 2500 scale is really scaled down, so we can't really do that in a sense, but we can do something that's a little bit similar. So we're going to do some pre-shading, but not quite the way we would normally do it in scale modeling. So what we're going to do, getting out some good old thinners, we're going to nicely thin this down. Now I'm going to be using Vallejo, which Vallejo you don't normally have to thin them down so much. I'm using 57 black, their Model Air. You can sort of basically spray this neat through the airbrush, but when we're doing pre-shading, we don't really need to put it in neat. I do find it'll sort of block up your nozzle pretty sort of quickly, so almost going for a 50-50 mix on this one, right? And we're just gonna mix that in with a nice paintbrush, nice and easy, in the colour cup. Right, let's just clean that off, put it back in my pot of water, sort of spray it on the kitchen paper towel just to see how it's coming out. Your air pressure, you know, slightly below 20 psi, and just spraying it on the kitchen paper towel seems like it's like spraying nicely, which basically what you're looking for is a nice feathered spray to it. You don't want it to be speckling, which basically means you need to either up the pressure or add more thinners. Most likely, most of the time, add a bit more thinners. You want it to have some sort of good coverage to it. So if you're not getting good coverage, maybe you thinned it down a bit too much, so just add a bit more paint to the mix.